Good morning, or good afternoon. My name is Abraham. I'm here with Bartlett Tree Experts. Happy first day of spring, everyone. I'm here to talk to you today about, I guess a few different specific things that are impacting our kind of forest at large, landscapes that we all manage, and just try to give you a little bit of insights onto, what we've been seeing, how we've been dealing with it, and, hopefully, we'll talk about stuff you guys are interested in, and if not, we'll move on and we'll talk about something else. All right? Maybe we can have everybody kind of gather in because I'm kind of competing with all the noise of everybody else bustling around here. So, I guess the primary two things I'm going to talk about are emerald ash borer and beech leaf disease. Certainly in terms of the most direct threat to, killing thousands of trees around here in our area, probably hundreds of thousands or millions if you add them all up, is going to be these two, pests. But we'll talk first about emerald ash borer. It's maybe the more straightforward of the kind of complex issues. Emerald ash borer is a flat-headed borer. They're a insect that feeds on the tissue in the cambium, the kind of live tissue between the bark and the stem. They are, similar in order to bronze birch borer, which we probably are a little more familiar with dealing with in our area for, the last 30 or 40 years, I suppose. Emerald ash borer is new to our region, but not new to the country. It is a invasive insect, not native to our country, and as such, we don't have any, natural biological controls that limit the population in any real way. The woodpeckers are certainly eating a lot of them, but not enough to control the population to, enough to save our ash trees. And it is, a pest we've observed throughout the country in different areas.
What is it? We can't hear you that well. What is it called?
It's called emerald ash borer.
Emerald ash borer.
Ash, like ash tree. Yep. This is the, what the insect looks like, although they're only around for a few weeks in the spring. They emerge as adults, lay their eggs on ash trees, whether they're infected or not, but the populations can just really explode. We are right now in peak infestation. The first observed the issue probably in 2020 in our area, maybe a little earlier. But at this moment, last year, at least as an arborist, it was easy for me to observe that every ash tree around was struggling. The year before, it was, apparent to me too, but it's for a layperson, maybe not. But this year, ash trees are either going to be dead or dying. We've kind of, in large part, reached the point where, we're at peak infestation. They're going to be everywhere. And if an ash tree has not been treated proactively at this point, the chances of it being salvageable are probably not good. But for those that are treated, that is an easy or, relatively easy and effective treatment method. But, in terms of the larger forest environment, not really practical. For feature trees, that are critical to people's properties, and there's, a will to invest in treating them indefinitely, then there's great options. But, the number of trees that is actually going to happen for is, very small in comparison to the actual population of ash tree around. Ash tree is a pretty important part of our kind of natural forest system here. But it isn't as widespread as some of our other tree species. They do tend to grow, like many different trees along with the soil textures and profiles that they are best suited to grow into. So there are a lot of swaths, in our area where you find a lot of ash trees, but not far from there aren't many at all. So the places where this is going to be most severely impacted is going to be in pockets, and many of the trees in that little area are going to die, but it isn't going to necessarily, as you look around, maybe be something you notice, everywhere. But what's that?
What soil types are they predisposed to?
I guess they're generally in wetter places, but not swampy, But yeah, I guess so. That they're and it does tend to be like east to west bands of them, for whatever reason. It's probably glacially related. I'm sure it is, like what got left behind, right? The issue with emerald ash borer is that they do really work very quickly to kill a tree. There we go. We have a couple of visual aids here. One of the first things you'll see, with an ash tree is some of the woodpecker activity. Typically higher up in the canopy, you'll see little pieces of bark getting popped off, especially this time of year as those grubs, the larvae, are reaching a good size. The woodpeckers really go wild on them. So we'll be getting calls from people in the next few weeks saying there's bark all over the place under my ash trees. But by the time it reaches, this point, the tree is, there's no salvaging it at that point. Because what is happening underneath there is this kind of burrowing from the borers. You can see these galleries where, they are pretty large insects, and they just kind of chew through the cambium there. It's very disruptive, and they just end up girdling the stems. Unfortunately, with ash tree too, they are just a generally kind of brittle tree. So once they die, they do tend to break apart pretty quickly and become pretty hazardous. So if you do have ash trees and they are, near anything that you care about that is there all the time, whether it's your house or your car or some particular target you don't want to see damaged, removing them, when they're dead or proactively if you're not going to decide to treat them is well advised.
Treat it first. When you really get them, can you still treat them when it happens, or is that?
It really depends on the level of infestation. If you catch it early, you can intervene. But if a tree has been girdled to that extent, we rely on a product that we inject into the vascular tissue of the tree. It has to be carried by the tree's vascular tissue through the rest of the canopy of it. And if it's choked off by that girdling, it can't move there. It's case by case, but by the time you've seen substantial dieback in the top of a tree or it really thinning out and declining, it may be too late. For a lot of folks, I've been treating their trees for the last 8 years, because we knew it was coming. But not everyone is ahead of the kind of trend, and we are saving some really nice ash trees out there and preserving them, but we certainly can't get to all of them. The treatment method is done by drilling into the vascular tissue of the tree and injecting this what's called mectonite abamectin benzoate, if you really care to know. But
Is it a chemical?
it is a chemical. Yeah, it's an insecticide.
Not organic.
No. It is, fortunately, very limited to being pumped into the stem of this tree. It's not something that needs to be sprayed or even applied to the soil. It's, only affecting, insects that are chewing on this particular tree, So it is a very isolated, treatment, and, the only thing that's going to really offer a great way to protect them. Yep. Any questions about emerald ash borer?
No, that's enough bad news.
Yeah, before we move on to.
Do those borers affect any other species?
That is a good question. Like most insect disease pests, they are pretty, selective about what they feed on. So, really only plants that are very closely related to ash. All ash species are susceptible. There are things like fringe tree, which is like a kind of a semi-popular landscape tree with nice white flowers. Chionanthus is the genus, and that is also susceptible to emerald ash borer. But outside of that, there aren't many others that you need to worry about.
So you had said that if they are on site, let's say, we had a large ash tree that did not have any leaves last year, so it looks like, and also the bark is similar to what you just described with your pictures.
Yep.
We have 6 or 7 other ash trees in the general area.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that those are all either susceptible, or they're already
Certainly susceptible, and hopefully as the growth comes out this year that they may be unaffected at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if they already are. Yeah. I'm happy to come and look at them for you if you're interested in trying to preserve them. Yeah.
When you do that treatment, is it just a one-time thing?
Not every year. Fortunately, it does have some, relatively long residual compared to like a lot of things that we try to do, but it's only 2 years. So it needs to be done every other year, which is, better than every year or every couple months, I suppose. But, the issue too is that there are going to be a whole lot of ash trees around that are going to die. But new seed is going to be developed. New young ash trees are going to grow before they get to a point where they're something that the borers are going to want to eat, a few inches in diameter. Those will die, but then they'll produce more seed. And we're going to have a lot of still ash trees around, for many years, and still have a lot of that the ash borer population to infect trees that, at some point the pressure will go down a bit, but it's always going to be around, in the places where, Bartlett throughout the country, right? But where they've had ash come and they've gone through and most of the ash trees have died, folks have said, I'm going to stop treating the ash because, I don't see any other ash trees in the neighborhood, and they inevitably get it, So it is something that is going to be indefinitely needing to be done. Yeah.
How much does it cost for one very young tree? How much does it cost?
It really depends on, how many trees you're treating, this diameter of the tree, it can vary quite a bit, but, between, on the low end for treating a tree, $200. On the high end, depending on the diameter of the stem, $700 or $800. Maybe more if it's really big. And then if you're treating, a whole lot of them, maybe you're able to do it a little more efficiently. But every situation is a little different, right? Moving on from emerald ash borer, we've got another kind of bad news in emerging pests, something called beech leaf disease. Beech leaf disease is certainly a newer developing issue, something that we really only caught wind of in 2020, 2021 is really when we started noticing it here on the South Shore. Beech leaf disease, most things that are called a disease are typically associated with a fungus or something, but disease actually really just means a set of symptoms. So beech leaf disease is actually caused by a microscopic worm-like organism, a nematode. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Latin name of the nematode because no one's going to remember it anyway. But they are, very damaging, as we're coming to find out, to our American beech trees as well as European beech. They look kind of like this. This is obviously under a microscope. But what they do that is so problematic is that they feed within the bud of the tree on the developing leaf tissue. And when those leaves are very teeny tiny, it doesn't take much disruption to be problematic for them. Let's see if I can go back to this slide. Now, you can see, like, this is kind of looking up through the bottom of the leaf and letting the sunlight reflect through it, and you can see this kind of banding in the leaf. A lot of times associated with kind of this blistering. And unfortunately, this is kind of like the beginning stages of beech leaf disease, with the banding there. It can progress pretty substantially to what ends up being bud mortality. They do so much damaging with inside the developing bud and those little leaves that they actually kill the bud off, and it never emerges. Which is why, as we walk through our beech forests the last few springs, it looks like the fall still. The leaves don't come out. And the trees in response, use their energy stores to develop new buds and grow new advantageous growth. A lot of times those leaves that come out are a lot bigger and kind of thinner. Don't quite look like a typical beech leaf, but they will kind of generate a second canopy depending on how vital that tree was to begin with. But repeated years of having buds be killed, having to push out new growth, generate as much energy as they can, and then have it all happen over again to them, really just sends them in a spiral downward. And unfortunately with our American beech, they had been dealing with another kind of disease issue called beech bark disease, which also not necessarily, does have a fungus related, but is actually transmitted by a scale insect that introduces that Nectria bark canker, and has already weakened a lot of areas where there are a lot of beech trees. Compounding that with this beech leaf disease, it doesn't really bode well for American beech at large. What's that? Yeah, well, there is. So back in 2021, when beech leaf disease became a really big issue, we did not have anything that we knew to be effective. It had, I guess I'll step back a little bit, about 10 years before that, it had been identified in Ohio in a very small area where it was wreaking havoc in the same scale, doing the same thing to the beech trees in that little area, but didn't seem to be spreading. And then in just a couple of years, it went from that very small area to everywhere, And I certainly observed personally where I saw it on a couple of trees in 2021, and then 2022 I saw it on a whole lot of things, and by 23 every beech tree had it. And we now know it's caused by this nematode. I guess we did know that it was caused by that nematode back in 2021, but we still don't know how it spread so effectively. They are a little microscopic worm that doesn't have wings. They are effectively able to wriggle along on wet surfaces, but like from Ohio to here is a long way to wriggle, They have been found inside the digestive systems of birds, and we know that there are a lot of birds that eat the buds and then are moving them that way, but even still, that's a whole lot of bird defecation to spread those from Ohio to here so widely. But I don't know if this video is going to work. Hopefully it will. Let's see. Nope.
That means they're able to survive the digestive tract.
Yes, yeah, they are. And Oh boy. Oh, I got nothing working. This is a video of, well, you know, it's not playing, but a video of the nematodes in a petri dish where they had taken some like punch holes of the leaves, and it's just incredible the amount of nematodes that are wriggling around in here. You know, they're microscopic, but they're like, you know, in the millions of them that came just from a very small little sample out of a leaf. You know, and the population just went from, you know, very small to unthinkably large, you know. And so they're, you know, they're moving around, whether it's on the wind or, you know, with birds, or, you know, they're small enough that they, you know, could ride on a pollen grain, you know, like, so it's really hard to know exactly how they're spreading, but whether, you know, how it's happening isn't really all that material, I suppose, because it's happening nonetheless, right? And so I was involved with some of the kind of first trial treatments for, you know, fluopyram, which is one of the, you know, the first methods we found to be effective. It's a foliar spray where we have to treat the trees in the growing season. You know, the problem with that treatment strategy is that there is a time when they're feeding on the leaves of the tree, and we're able to get, you know, control of those at that particular time. But, you know, any ones that come in afterwards and, you know, can repopulate the tree, and also, you know, we aren't effectively able to get it into that developing bud where, you know, the nematodes actually do their primary damage. We did have good results with that treatment method, and still do. Mostly in places where we've got a specimen tree that is somewhat isolated from, you know, a beech forest. Places where we're, or at least have tried to treat trees that are like along a edge of a yard where it's, you know, beech forest behind there. We were able to get some marginal control with those foliar treatments, but, you know, not ideal. Fortunately, we have discovered another method that is also very effective, or is, and maybe more so, which involves a, oh, maybe this is going to play. Involves a trunk injection treatment as well, where we're, you know, applying a product into the vascular tissue of the tree. In this case, it's a like macro injection where we have to pump, you know, what can be 40 gallons of material into a large diameter tree. But in doing so, it incorporates that material into all of the tissue of the plant, into those developing buds where those nematodes are feeding. So it's really a game changer in terms of like efficacy, and it has a nice long residual of, well, we don't know how long, because we expect it to last for 3 years. The first trees that we treated were back in 2013, so we just haven't reached the end of when we expect the treatment to be effective. I'm sure there's going to be some variability. Here our video is working now, and you can...
Reasonable for a specimen tree in New York. You've got 2 acres of trees.
You're going to need to pick a few. You know, but realistically, it's, you know, not looking promising for a large scale. I mean, and we just don't know enough about it. So, I mean, there may end up being some resistant trees out there. You know, by some miracle, there may be a natural control that comes in to, you know, feed on all of these nematodes. But if it goes the way that most things go, it's probably not, you know, looking that way, you know. And, you know, inevitably there are going to be specimen trees that, you know, people want to treat and invest in that we can keep going indefinitely, but is going to require, you know, continued treatment.
Are larger trees, bigger, older trees more vulnerable or stronger?
The same, you know, I mean, you know, I mean, over mature trees, just like any of us, like, as you get older, like you may be more likely to have something come knock you out, right? But given a good stable environment, if mature trees can be even healthier than small trees, it really depends, but, there's some, like American beech is highly susceptible. Some European beeches tend to be somewhat less, but I've certainly seen European beeches devastated by it. So, so it really depends on the beginning condition of the tree.
We have a European beech that we planted a few years ago. It's probably about 15 to 20 feet tall with maybe a 4 to 5 inch caliper.
Yep.
Would it help to feed around the tree to fertilize it and also to spray those leaves with pressurized water?
No, not the pressurized water. Fertilization, yes, in terms of maintaining the vitality of the tree, that is going to help as long as you're using the appropriate stuff, And then a thing I didn't mention is something called potassium phosphite. It is a form of potassium that is very helpful for trees in reducing stress, and there is really, the good documented evidence that treatments with potassium phosphite are helpful in a tree combating beech leaf disease. Not as a direct way to control the nematode population, but in letting the tree, yes, right? Now, if you're talking about spraying the tree, treating it with something called fluopyram, which is a fungicide that actually works to control those nematodes at the appropriate time, is the way to manage that. And once it reaches a particular diameter, it becomes a candidate to have that trunk injection treatment. But for smaller trees, we're still treating the foliage.
Okay, great.
Yep.
How often do you have to do the trunk diameter treatment?
We are expecting it's going to be 3 years. So every 3 years, the product that we use is called Arbortect, and it's a systemic fungicide as well. That, again, for whatever reason, is there is a reason. I'm not I'm not a chemist or but it is the same product that we use to control Dutch elm disease in American elms. And we know there it has a 3-year efficacy. So we're kind of applying that to what we think is going to be the case for beech leaf disease, but we haven't had enough time between when we treated the first ones to see when it's going to wear off.
I have an 80-year-old European beech, which has yet to show any symptoms,
Yeah.
as you were saying. Is it necessary to treat it possibly prophylactically before it gets the disease, or what would you recommend?
I would recommend it, treating it proactively, for the reason that it is easier to keep a tree healthy than it is to reverse a decline in a tree. If you're waiting for it to thin out and start dying back and struggle, reversing that trend is much more of a challenge for me as an arborist than, having a healthy tree and keeping it healthy, So, I would, at a minimum, treat it with potassium phosphite to help, with stress. Also helpful with something called Phytophthora root rot, which beech is highly susceptible to. There are, other issues that beech trees get that you have to worry about beyond beech leaf disease, but, it currently is the kind of biggest and most recent development. And it's compounded other issues. I mentioned that beech bark scale. There's a woolly beech aphid that seems to really be thriving in those damaged leaves. Apparently there's more nitrogen within those kind of green or banded spots, and it's just extra good food for those woolly beech aphids. So, but again, it's there are ways to help with that, but it's it's a tough time to be a beech tree, I guess.
What's the best time of year to treat your tree?
Last year. Optimally, you're trying to get that. If we're talking about the trunk injection treatment, in early in the growing season, so that those buds haven't had a chance to form and the nematodes haven't started damaging those newly forming leaves in there. But really the best time is to treat it whenever you can get it in. Because I get approached to treat a tree at the end of a growing season, and I know that say if I treat a tree in August, that there's already going to have been some bud formation. There may be some damage in those first form leaves, but at that point I can try to already start the process of intervention. So the next year you may have some damaged leaves, but a lot of the newly developing stuff may come out and be better. So
We have a very large tree that's had the disease for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So beech leaf disease, unlike emerald ash borer, is going to progress slower within the tree system. If you had a relatively healthy tree and it's got beech leaf disease, it's going to take several years for it to really get to a point where turning it around is not feasible. If you already had a struggling tree, it may be the thing to push it over, right? But whereas with emerald ash borer, it gets that borer disease, it's dead in 2 years or less. It's going to happen much slower with beeches in general. So, probably not too late, hopefully so.
This is a big, beautiful tree, but it's got
Yeah. The results we've achieved have been really good.
What's the cost for the trunk?
A general, if it's a big tree, $60 per inch in diameter of the stem.
Big tree.
Megan, yeah.
You've helped me with my beech tree. I think you've saved it.
Yeah.
But we've been learning a lot about now I have tons of leaves because the beech tree is in really good shape.
Uh-huh.
And we're talking about pests for trees and stuff. How do you balance removing the leaves from the ground and balancing the pests, introduction of pests? And
So with beech, with your tree in particular, there shouldn't be any nematodes in there to really add to any kind of substantial population. And what you're really worrying about with with nematodes is the eggs that they're going to lay for the next year. But I don't think that there's great evidence to support removing fallen beech leaves is making a big impact on infecting the tree the next year or whatever, or other pests. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times just letting leaves compost and turn back into the soil is what's happens in nature, right? And the closer we can kind of mimic that in our little environments where we grow plants like pets, the better. So there are other foliar disease issues, needlecast fungus on spruce trees, or anthracnose or cedar apple rust, or any number of diseases that are caused by funguses that spread by spores. And in that case, cleaning some of those fallen leaves out that are infected from underneath your tree, putting a fresh layer of mulch down between the soil and the new foliage that grows to block some of that spores from coming up can make a big difference. But in beech leaf disease, I don't, to my knowledge, I don't think it's relevant. All right. So again, this is just a little demonstration of what we do to treat the beech tree. We've got this 50-gallon trash barrel, a high tech, with a pump in there, and then we drill into the root flare of the tree, hook it up, and intravenously apply this product. When a tree is taken it up and everything's going well, in a couple of hours we can put 60 or 70 gallons into a trunk of a tree. It's amazing. You drill this little hole and where does it go? I don't know. Well, I mean, we know where it goes, but it's wild that it's drinks it right up.
Pumpkin.
Yeah, yep. But the tree really does a lot of the work. You know, it really you're just kind of putting some, you know, minimal pressure into it, and it just kind of sucks it up like a straw. You know, in some cases, like it'll pump. If you don't even have the pump on, it'll just pull it up if you've got a siphon. You know.
Is it taking in that much because of the drought?
No, I mean that's just the way trees. I mean trees pull up. Through their root system, they're pulling up hundreds of gallons daily. You know, I mean thousands. You know, it's amazing. You know, but yeah, it's just kind of taking a ride with the stuff up there. Yeah. All right, 12:40. Does anybody have any beech leaf questions?
Does keeping the tree well watered help it?
Yes. I mean,
Okay, it doesn't.
in general, yeah. Not going. You know, I mean these nematodes do move effectively on wet surfaces, right? So when things are dry, largely, right, they don't move around as well. And when we do have wet and rainy conditions, like they can be observed, like crawling around on the stems. If you're watering your tree, you shouldn't be putting the water up into the canopy of it. So it shouldn't matter, in the last couple of years, sure. During the driest times of the year, a good soaking, even a few times in a season can really help to reduce the stress in a tree. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean that has nothing to do with whether it being an oak or anything. I mean, likely a past defect in the tree and introduced decay within the stem, and that's a common thing that happens to all tree species. Some have defects, some don't, but unlikely a result of a specific pest. And even if a tree is hollow, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to fall over either. A lot of hollow trees that are perfectly fine to stand. It just, it's very much situational.
You notice this disease, jumping species, Kusa dog with that stripe leaves?
Mm-hmm. No.
Similar symptoms that are not, they're on the other side of the yard. But
You should not see any carryover from beech leaf disease onto any other species.
okay, so
Yep.
you don't know that it has done, because I see it in the woods and on my Kusa dogwood that look very, very much the same.
Very similar.
Striping and
I mean, there's things called intervenal chlorosis, which are like a micronutrient deficiency that you might see, like green bands in like a leaf that follow along the veins, and that could be a manganese deficiency or something, which is very common in our area. But no way it could be beech leaf disease on your dogwood.
okay, I didn't know if the nematodes maybe
Nope.
are expanding there.
No, not as far as we know. No, and there are plenty of things like Japanese maple scale that you'll see on Japanese maples and on crab apples and dogwoods, snowbells. There's, just because it's called Japanese maple scale doesn't mean it's isolated to Japanese maple. But a lot of other pests are very specific to a small, limited, number of trees. We didn't get into how this was introduced in the country. I think it was a bonsai tree actually that had been brought in from a Japanese beech that was brought into Ohio, and it just kind of spread from there. Yep. But that's we live in a global world, right? And that's I guess the rest of my talk, that I don't have much time to deliver. Is that there are newly emerging insects, disease, pests, things that we are going to be experiencing, more and more commonly, and have been more and more commonly, and you never know what is going to be the thing that introduces the next nematode, that nobody's ever thought about that can be widely devastating, I guess the the comfort I take in it is that once we're all long gone, things will balance out. But, once humans are here screwing with things, I think we're going to be dealing with more and more of these problems, just real quick, another invasive pest, one that we've been dealing with much longer than beech leaf disease, one that has just gone crazy this last year. Cottony taxiscale or Cottony camellia scale, two names for the same insect. If you got hollies, most of the time they really love the Japanese holly, or not, they're Meservi holly. They're actually a cross between English and Japanese holly, but the blue princess is the kind of most common. I've seen them on there for years, but they were on Japanese hollies this year. I saw them on hydrangeas. I saw them on Rosa Sharon. They were just anything that could potentially get Cottony taxiscale had it. A lot of sooty mold associated with it, kind of making a mess of our landscapes. Just been favorable conditions for them for the last few years. Probably going to ebb and flow, but I would expect that hollies are going to be getting it big time this year. A newly emerging one is chili thrips, affecting hydrangeas, big leaf hydrangea primarily, or really solely. That's the Macrophylla Vico Blue and the summer. Any of the kind of round flowered, mostly blue or pink, are going to be getting hydrangea or chili thrips. It's one of those things where I saw it on a few plants and now I see it on every hydrangea, especially ones that are in sunnier spots. That's tends to be the spot where they get hit the worst. Something that starts in late June, July, continues through the summer. But if you see your hydrangeas with these waxy curled leaves, eventually turning brown, they stunt the growth for those improved varieties that flower on new growth, developing those flowers late into the season. They really can stop them from flowering. So that's something to be on the lookout for. The other things, Dutch elm disease with the drought we've had in the last few years. Been stressful for trees. I've been seeing a lot of elm trees succumb to Dutch elm disease last year, some the year before. I'd expect next year is going to be a big year for Dutch elm disease. If you have an elm tree that is one you care about, consider treating it, because it's effective proactively. Once it gets it, we really don't get great results. The Norway spruce, unfortunately, I think is also a tree that may not be with us for long. Has been a really awesome tree for us for so long. It's getting something called spruce gall midge. I don't have time to talk about it, but there's really no intervention for it. If you look around, you drive around and take a close look at Norway spruces. The more mature ones that's so thin up in the top, a bunch of stunted growth. They're just have been not doing well for the last few years, and it's going to catch up to them. Calorie pear, now on the invasive species list in Massachusetts. You can't plant another one after 2028, but has been getting this pear trellis rust, very popular tree because of its disease resistance for many, many, many years. Now it's a tree that has to be treated because they look terrible, and can really progress to a point where they're need to be removed. Box tree moth is a new thing that's going to be devastating boxwoods potentially. Really damaging caterpillar that it's going to be difficult to control. Hopefully it doesn't show up and wreak havoc here, but that may be coming. We might be hearing more and more about that in the next few years. Sorry to deliver all this bad news to you right at the end. Lilacs and privets, I don't know if you've all noticed them looking very poor in the last few years. Pseudocercospora fungus is a leaf spot that has been damaging them quite a bit, causing them to shed a lot of leaves. Starts as spots, they turn brown, they fall off by the end of the summer. Easy thing to treat proactively, but something that lilacs and privets were things that I had to give very little care for in the past, and becoming one of our higher maintenance plant species. A fungicide for the leaf spot disease. They also get a thrips insect now too, which is and then same with privet too is. I think with the increased number of weakened ash trees, we're seeing more of this ash privet borer, which I've seen a whole lot of like ash trees with dying stems and not looking good, and some of that has been that ash privet borer. Magnolia, that's a native insect, so there you go. We got something that's at least, and then magnolia scale, another native pest, but has been really going wild. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was a pleasure chatting with you. I will, be hanging out over at the booth where we're handing out trees. If you guys have more questions, I can chat with you there, but I'll get out of the way so the next speaker can talk. Thank you.